Michael Coleman loved flying and never experienced any discomfort doing it. The way he saw it, it was a sign of prosperity and demonstrated that he'd achieved a lot by his 30s. Michael wasn't exactly a millionaire, but still believed that he was one of the powers that be. In order to match his status, the man felt the need to behave arrogantly and often went too far with it. That day, having taken his seat on the plane, Michael looked around with a displeased look on his face. The first thing that caught the eye of the businessman was his seat. It wasn't bad, but Michael believed that it wasn't good enough and that he deserved a more comfortable spot. As it turned out, the man wanted to sit by the window, but he got assigned to an aisle seat. On top of that, Michael's neighbor turned out to be an elderly man who was reading a magazine by the time Michael got there. Looking discontentedly at the old man, the businessman asked the flight attendant to come over. "Get me something to drink, and don't forget a couple of ice cubes," Michael said, as if he owned the place. Of course, the young flight attendant wasn't used to such treatment, but she didn't take Michael's words to heart. Moreover, the young woman loved her job and accepted every part of it. Maybe if she stood up to the passenger right away, all the subsequent disagreements could have been avoided. Nevertheless, she calmly served the man who was clearly dead set on causing a scene. When the flight attendant brought Michael his drink, he took the glass and immediately grimaced in displeasure. "Why is it warm? I asked for it to be cold," the businessman said, louder than he should have. "I'm sorry, sir, but I put in 2 ice cubes, just like you asked," the woman said quietly. But Michael was already on a roll, dead set on telling the flight attendant what he thought about the airline and the service it provided. At that moment, the old man that was sitting next to Michael came to the young flight attendant's defense. "Young man, calm down. I don't think you should cause a scene over something so unimportant," the elderly man said cautiously. The businessman gave his neighbor a contemptuous look, after which he called the flight attendant back over. "What is this old man doing here? Is he even allowed to fly at this age? What are the chances that he's going to live long enough to even land?" Michael asked loudly and laughed at what he felt was a hilarious joke. However, the businessman didn't take into account one thing. Most of the passengers were decent adults who immediately came to the old man's defense, especially since the old man didn't offend Michael, but rather tried to calm him down. Having finished the drink, the businessman immediately ordered a second one, which got him a disapproving look from his neighbor. The old man had nothing against alcohol, but he didn't think that it was necessary to drink so much during a flight. Meanwhile, Michael continued to bully the young flight attendant. At first, he didn't like his seat. Then he didn't like his drink. Then he didn't like the man sitting next to him. "I'll write up a complaint, and trust me, it'll reach the company's highest management," Michael declared. "Fine, that's your right, sir," the flight attendant said, pursing her lips touchily. The truth was, the young woman hadn't had to deal with such an arrogant and annoying passenger in a long time. The old man sitting next to Michael tried to get him to calm down again, which was met by approving exclamations from other passengers. It seemed that the old man was the only one willing to stand up to the entitled businessman, who felt the right to bully everyone around him. Who is he, and where could he be flying at such an age? He must be at least 100 years old, the businessman thought, having a very hard time keeping his irritation in check. The man couldn't get control of the anger he was feeling, and therefore he continued to get on the nerves of the unfortunate flight attendant. "Believe me, the management of your company won't get away with treating their passengers this way. I'm on my way to important negotiations. A lot depends on them, so trust me, I'll make sure I'm heard and apologized to," Michael said, having finished his second drink. At this point, the flight attendant couldn't take it anymore. She was willing to do anything only to get this obnoxious passenger to be quiet. Luckily, the old man sitting next to Michael came to the rescue. Without raising his voice, the old man quickly cornered Michael with his arguments. He spoke as if he'd been negotiating his entire life and knew how to turn the conversation the way that worked for him. Eventually, Michael calmed down and stopped harassing everyone. The businessman spent the rest of his flight sitting quietly and thinking about something of his own. "That man is strange. He's so old, but his mind is so sharp. He doesn't look like he came from some village or something," Michael thought. Soon the plane landed, and all the passengers breathed a sigh of relief. First of all, they were glad that they wouldn't have to spend another minute around the arrogant businessman who turned their flight into a living hell. Meanwhile, Michael hurried to the exit in order to get a taxi. He was going to the office where he was supposed to get a promotion that would change his life for the better. Michael worked hard to get this promotion. The man grew up in a poor family, and therefore he was used to saving every cent from an early age. By the time he graduated from high school, he already knew exactly what he needed to do. Michael had to go through a lot in order to succeed in business. Of course, the man was still dependent on his superiors, and his position was rather precarious. But overall, Michael was proud to say that he had achieved most of his goals. All of these thoughts flashed through Michael's head on his way to the office of the trading company. There were already at least a dozen expensive cars in the parking lot in front of the building. Wow, everyone's here already, Michael thought, paying the cab fare. Since the meeting was taking place in the assembly hall, it was very crowded. The director of the company called out the names of everyone who was getting a promotion, while the audience applauded cheerfully. Michael was very excited and nervous, waiting for his turn. However, after the director announced several employees who got a promotion, he paused to introduce his father, who gave the company a second life. Imagine Michael's surprise when he saw the old man from the plane take the stage. The same man who tried to reason with him when he was being extremely obnoxious during their flight. No, this can't be happening. Is this old man really the owner of the company? The businessman thought sadly. At that moment, his imagination painted a vivid picture for him. The man clearly saw what the consequences could be for his unseemly behavior on the plane. There's no way I'm getting promoted now, Michael thought, feeling desperate. Imagine the businessman's surprise when the old man took the stage and congratulated Michael on getting promoted and even shook his hand. Moreover, he acted as if he'd never seen Michael before in his life. At first, the businessman even decided that the old man didn't recognize him. But when Michael met his eyes, he immediately knew that that wasn't the case. Benjamin Parker had an excellent memory, and of course he remembered the quarrelsome man from their flight earlier. Michael's first thought was to apologize right there and then. But then he imagined the faces of his colleagues and subordinates and realized that it wasn't the right thing to do. Moreover, the old man didn't demand an apology from him anyway. When the official part of the event came to an end and everyone went back to their offices, Mr. Parker was the first one to approach Michael. "Do we know each other?" The old man began cautiously. The businessman shuddered, then lowered his eyes embarrassedly. "Yes, we do know each other. I'd like to apologize for my behavior on the plane. I don't know what came over me. It was probably all the agitation I was feeling," Michael said, stuttering. To the surprise of the young businessman, the old man was very sympathetic and didn't lecture or reprimand him. Instead, Benjamin Parker wished Michael to always remain human and never cross the line again. "Also, if you intend to continue working at our company, I suggest that you apologize to the flight attendant, whom you harassed for no good reason," the old man said. Michael smiled and deep down felt relieved. "Of course I will. I will definitely do that. I give you my word," the businessman hastened to assure the old man. Soon, he was already rushing over to the flower shop where he bought a huge bouquet of roses. As it turned out a little later, the name of the flight attendant, whom Michael mistreated on the plane, was Monica. Of course, the woman didn't hold a grudge against him, although she did immediately recognize him. "Here, this is for you. I am so sorry about my behavior. I'm sorry I was so obnoxious," Michael muttered embarrassedly and held out the flowers. Monica smiled and accepted his apology. But that wasn't the end of this amazing story. Looking at Monica in a different setting, Michael noticed that the flight attendant whom he was so mean to was very pretty and even looked a little like his late mother. It just so happened that the two of them quickly became friends, and everything that had happened on the plane seemed like an absurd accident to them. Michael couldn't have even imagined that his outburst on the plane would end up being the beginning of a new relationship in his life, which would eventually turn into something bigger than just friendship. A year later, Michael and Monica got married, making their friends and family feel incredibly happy for them. The most interesting part, however, was that Benjamin Parker was the guest of honor at the ceremony. which seemed appropriate since he inadvertently became the reason they got together in the first place. Well, all we can do now is feel glad that this story had a happy ending and that everyone in it got what they wanted and deserved.